A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, adapted for the stage and radio by Jeffrey Chipps, Michael Makita, Jessica Schermeister, and Sadie Rollins. Presented by Steel City Shakespeare Center, featuring the talents of Tracey Turner, Aaron Crutchfield, Christine McGrath, and Irene Alby.
Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. Oh, old Marley was as dead as a doornail.
Mind, we don't mean to say that we know, of our own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined, myself, to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and our unhallowed hands shall not disturb it. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail.
Scrooge knew Marley was dead? Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain.
The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point we started from.
There is no doubt that Marley was dead.
This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story we are going to relate.
Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley.
Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. Scrooge, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his nose, shriveled his cheeks, stiffened his gait, and made his eyes red. His thin lips blew, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him.
He iced his office in the dog days, and it didn't thaw 1 degree at Christmas.
Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting-house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, heating their hands upon their breast and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them.
The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring in at every cranny and keyhole and was so dense without that although the court was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. To see the dingy cloud come drooping down, obscuring everything, one might have thought that nature lived hard by and was brewing on a large scale.
The door of Scrooge's counting-house was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk,
who, in a little dismal cell beyond, was copying letters.
Scrooge had a very small fire.
But the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like 1 coal. But he couldn't replenish it.
For Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room.
And so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel,
the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part.
Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed.
"A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach.
"Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!"
He had so heated himself with rapid walking in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure."
"Merry Christmas! What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough."
"Come then, what right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough."
Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said,
"Bah!"
again, and followed it up with,
"Humbug!"
"Don't be cross, Uncle."
What else can I be, when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? Oh, if I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should."
"Uncle!"
"Ah, nephew, keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine."
"Keep it? But you don't keep it."
"Let me leave it alone, then. Much good it may do you. Much good it has ever done you."
"There are many things from which I might have derived good by which I have not profited. I dare say Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time as the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people not by status or importance, but as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good, and I say God bless it."
Hear, 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 Fred.
"Let me hear another sound from you, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation." "Ah, you're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament."
"Don't be angry, Uncle. Come. Dine with my wife and I tomorrow."
"Why did you get married?"
"Because I fell in love."
"Because you fell in love." Good afternoon.
"Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?"
Good afternoon.
"Nay, Uncle, I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?"
Good afternoon.
"I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I've been a party. But I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle!
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year!
Good afternoon.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Cratchit!
Merry Christmas, sir.
There's another fellow, my clerk, with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam.
This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let another person in.
She now stood with her hat off in Scrooge's office. She had books and papers in her hands and greeted him.
"Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?"
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
I have no doubt his generosity is well represented by his surviving partner.
It certainly was, for they had been two kindred spirits. At the ominous word generosity, Scrooge frowned and shook his head.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comfort, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the Union Workhouse, are they still in operation?
They are. Still, I wish I could say they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor, then?
Both very busy, sir.
Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time, of all others, when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone. And since you asked me what I wish, madam, this is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, then they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. It's not my business. It's enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, madam.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue her point, the gentlewoman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile the fog and darkness thickened. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible, and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds, with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. The cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the court, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. Foggier yet, and colder. The owner of one scant young nose, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of
God bless you, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay,
Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting-house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I were to stop £0.50 for it, you'd think yourself ill-used. Oh, I'll be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It's only once a year, sir.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning.
I will, sir. I promise.
The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide on Cornhill at the end of a lane of boys 20 times, in honor of its being Christmas Eve.
Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's books, went home to bed.
He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard, where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide-and-seek with other houses, and forgotten the way out again.
Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence at that place.
Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then, let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw the knocker without its undergoing any intermediate process of change. Not a knocker, but Marley's face.
It was not in impenetrable shadow, as the other objects in the yard were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression.
As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled would be untrue, but he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle.
He did pause, with a moment's irresolution, before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door, except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on, so he said,
"Humbug!"
and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. Up Scrooge went. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that.
Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell that hung in the room. It was with great astonishment, and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as it had begun.
It was succeeded by a clanking noise, deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar.
Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains.
The cellar door flew open with a booming sound.
And then he heard the noise much louder, on the floors below, then coming up the stairs.
Then coming straight towards his door.
"It's humbug still! I won't believe it!"
His color changed, though, when without a pause it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up, as though it cried, "I know him! Marley's ghost!" and fell again.
The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots, the tassels on the latter bristling like his pigtail, and his coat skirts, and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind.
Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley was gutless, but he had never believed it until now. How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Marley's voice, no doubt about it. Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who are you, then? You're particular for a shade.
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it then.
The ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were quite used to it.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. Oh, there's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are.
At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry. And shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon.
Mercy, mercy, dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me so?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do, I must. But why do you spirits walk the earth? Why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me! And witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness.
You are fettered. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it, link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain.
Scrooge glanced about him on the floor, and in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable, but he could see nothing. Jacob, oh, Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house.
7 years dead? And traveling all the time?
The whole time. No rest, no peace. Incessant torture of remorse.
Oh, you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business! Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. At this time of the rolling year, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down? Hear me! My time is nearly gone.
I will. Don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob. Pray don't.
I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer.
Oh, you were always a good friend to me. Thank you.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tonight when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second when the bell tolls 2. The third when the bell tolls 3. And look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us.
When it had said these words, the apparition walked backwards from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. Scrooge became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night.
Scrooge followed to the window. Desperate in his curiosity, he looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost.
Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double-locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say,
Hum, hum,
but stopped at the first syllable. He went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep upon the instant.
And now, a message from our sponsors.
Chips Dental Associates, family dentistry, providing full mouth restoration, implants, and whitening. Offices in Gibsonia and the North Hills. Visit chipsdental.com. Chips Dental Associates. Treating patients like family for 40 years.
When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. Midnight.
He scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off with the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything, and could see very little then. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold.
Scrooge went to bed again, and thought, and thought, and thought it over and over and over, and could make nothing of it.
Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself, after mature inquiry, that it was all a dream, his mind flew back again, like a strong spring released, to its first position. Scrooge lay in this state until he remembered, on a sudden, that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1.
He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past, and considering that he could no more go to sleep than to go to heaven, this perhaps was the wisest resolution in his power. A quarter past. Half past. A quarter to it. The hour itself, and nothing.
He spoke before the bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half-recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them.
It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions.
Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all was visible.
Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who? And what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past.
What business have you brought here?
Your reclamation. Take heed, rise and walk with me.
He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped his robe in supplication. I am mortal and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand, and you shall be upheld in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. Not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground.
Oh, good heaven! I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek?
A pimple, nothing more. Lead me where you will.
You recollect the way?
Remember it? I could walk it blindfolded.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other, until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it.
These are but shadows of the things that have been. They have no consciousness of us. The school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
I know him.
The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading.
Poor boy. I wish... Oh, but it's too late now.
What is the matter?
Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something. Oh, that's all.
Let us see another Christmas.
There he was, alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down, despairingly. Scrooge looked at the ghost and, with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door.
It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in.
Dear brother, I have come to bring you home, dear brother, to bring you home.
Home, little fan.
Yes, home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home, and he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you, and you are to be a man, and are never to come back here, but first... we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in the world.
Oh, and you are quite a woman, little fan. Oh.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered, but she had a large heart.
Oh, so she had. You're right. I will not gainsay it, spirit. God forbid.
She died a woman, and had, as I think, children.
One child.
True. Your nephew.
Yes.
Let us see another Christmas.
They were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, and all the strife and tumult of a real city were. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again, but it was evening and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door.
Do you know this door?
Know it? Was I apprenticed here?
They went in, at sight of an old gentleman sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement.
Why, it's old Fezziwig. Oh, bless his heart. It's Fezziwig, alive again.
Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7.
Yo ho there, Ebenezer!
Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in.
Yo ho, my boy! No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Christmas Ebenezer! Let's have the shutters up before a man can say Jack Robinson! Ha ha ha! Hilio, clear away, my lad. And let's have lots of room here. Cheer up, Ebenezer.
There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away, with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright as a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night.
The guests soon filed in, each more festive in appearance and demeanor than the one before. Mrs. Fezziwig with a vast, substantial smile, leading in the 3 beaming and lovable Miss Fezziwigs, followed by 6 young men whose hearts they broke. Then came all of the young men and women employed in the business, the housemaid with her cousin, the baker, the cook, and her brother's particular friend, the milkman. Then the boy across the way, seeking warm shelter and a hot meal while hiding from the girl next door.
Welcome, welcome, one and all.
And the last in the long line of this bumbling parade of partygoers was the daughter of Fezziwig's former business partner, Isabel, known affectionately to Fezziwig as
Belle, oh, so lovely to see you. I'd like to introduce you to a dear friend of mine. I trust you'll have a lot in common. Now, where has he gone to?
Oh, terribly sorry. Here, permit me to get that for you. Hello, I'm...
Ebenezer Scrooge! I'd like you to meet...
Isabel. Belle.
Oh, Maestro!
Would you care to dance?
Of course.
Well done, well done!
There were more dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake and plenty of beer.
During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self. He collaborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright face of his former self was turned from them, that he remembered the ghost.
A small matter, to make these silly folks so full of gratitude.
Small?
Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. 3 or 4, perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?
It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. The happiness he gives is as great as if it cost a fortune.
What is the matter?
I should have liked to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
My time grows short. Quick!
Again, Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall.
He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young belle in a mourning dress. It matters little to you. Very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has replaced you?
A golden one.
This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not?
What then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you.
Am I? Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until in good season we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you are. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words? No. Never.
In what then?
In a changed nature. In an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end. In everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now?
You think not?
I would gladly think otherwise if I could. Heaven knows, when I have learned a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. I do. And I release you. With a full heart for the love of him you once were. You may, the memory of what is past half makes me hope you will. Have pain in this. A very, very brief time, and if you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly as an unprofitable dream from which it happened well that you awoke, may you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?
One shadow more.
No more. No more. I don't wish to see it. You show me no more.
They were in another scene and place, a room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same until he saw her, now a comely matron. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count, and every child was conducting itself like 40 children. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care.
But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she, with laughing face and plundered dress, was borne towards it, the center of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents.
Ho, ho, ho! Belle, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Who was it?
Guess.
How can I? Tut, don't I know? Mr. Scrooge.
Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up and he had a candle inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat, alone. Quite alone in the world, I do believe.
Spirit, remove me from this place.
I told you these were shadows of the things that have been. That they are what they are, do not blame me.
Remove me! I cannot bear it. Leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer.
In the blink of an eye, the spirit vanished from sight, and all around Scrooge turned to pitch black. He panicked as if suddenly struck by blindness, and began feverishly swinging and grasping about in search of anything that might give him an indication of his surroundings. Within a few moments, he found his bed curtains and threw them aside. A faint moonlight leaked in through his bedroom window and assured him he was in his own house, his own room, his own bed. Suddenly, a feeling of total exhaustion washed over Scrooge, and he fell back into his bed and sank into a heavy sleep.
And now, a message from our sponsors. The Wounded Warrior Project's mission is to honor and empower wounded warriors who incurred a physical or mental injury, illness, or wound coincident to their military service on or after September 11th, 2001. Wounded Warrior Project connects, serves, and empowers wounded warriors. Learn more by visiting woundedwarriorproject.org. The greatest casualty is being forgotten.
Awaking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 2. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention.
Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 2 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling.
5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light, which streamed upon it when the clock proclaimed the hour in which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts. He began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door.
The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called to him and bade him enter.
"Ebenezer Scrooge, come in and know me better, man."
It was his own room. There was no doubt about that. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were hung with living green, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there. And such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney. Heaped up on the floor, to form a kind of throne, were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, and seething bowls of punch, that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door.
Come in and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me." It was clothed in one simple green robe or mantle, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "You have never seen the likes of me before?
Oh, never?
Have never walked forth with the younger members of my family? Meaning, for I am very young. My elder brother is born in these later years."
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1755. 1800!
Oh, a tremendous family to provide for. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working in me now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
The room and all of its festive decoration vanished instantly, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning where, for the weather was severe, the people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music in scraping the snow from the pavement in front of their dwellings, and from the tops of their houses, whence it was mad delight to the boys to see it come plumping down into the road below and splitting into artificial little snowstorms.
There are some upon this earth of yours who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are as strange to us and all our kith and kin as if they had never lived. Remember that, and charge their doings on themselves, not us.
And perhaps it was the pleasure the good spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous, hearty nature, and his sympathy with all poor men, that led him straight to Scrooge's clerks. For there he went, and took Scrooge with him, holding to his robe, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled.
Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, Cratchit's wife, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and make a goodly show for sixpence, and she laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes.
And now the two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose, and known it for their own. And basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, these young Cratchits danced about the table and exalted Master Peter Cratchit to the skies.
What has ever got your precious father, then? And your brother, Tiny Tim, and Martha? Weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour.
No, there's father coming.
In came Bob, the father, his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulders.
Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch, and had his limbs supported by an iron frame.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. He's growing so strong and hearty, that one.
Dinner! Bring out the goose, mother!
Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon to which a black swan was a matter of course. And in truth it was something very like it in that house. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all round the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife, and feebly cried,
Hurrah!
There never was such a goose.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us, every one.
He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, for he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner and a crutch without an owner carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, no. Oh, no, kind spirit, say that he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child, man.
Mr. Scrooge, I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
Ah, my dear, the children. Christmas Day!
It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you, poor fella.
Ah, my dear, just...
I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's, not for his. Long life to him. Mm-hmm. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I've no doubt. The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care a tuppence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for full 5 minutes.
After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, from the mere relief of Scrooge the baleful being done with.
By this time, it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily, and as Scrooge and the spirits went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful.
It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, gleaming room with the spirit standing smiling by his side and looking at that same nephew with approving affability. He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live. He believed it, too.
More shame for him, Fred.
Oh, he's a comical old fella, that's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, Fred. At least you always tell me so.
What of that, my dear Topper? His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking that he's ever going to benefit us with it.
I have no patience with him.
None at all, Fred.
Oh, I have. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of a dinner of his usual bread and gruel by coming here.
Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner by not coming here.
Well,
I'm very glad to hear it.
I was only going to say that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments which could do him no harm. I am sure he loses pleasanter companions that he could find in his own thoughts, either in his moldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not. For I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there in good temper year after year and saying, "Uncle Scrooge, how are you?" If it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50, That's something. And I think I shook him yesterday. After a while, they began to play at forfeits. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting, in the interest he had in what was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears. He sometimes came out with his guess quite loud, and very often guessed quite right. Let us play a game of yes and no.
Ooh, I do love this game. Let me go first.
Very well.
Is it an animal?
Of sorts.
Would I find it in London?
Most certainly.
Is it a cat?
No, not a cat.
A mouse!
A dog?
No.
Is it an agreeable animal?
Oh, decidedly not.
A mule? A mule?
Is it an ass?
Topper!
Well, no.
Oh, a snake then.
I should say no.
A goat?
I have found it out. I know what it is, Fred. I know what it is.
What is it?
It's your Uncle Scrooge.
He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure, and it would be ungrateful not to drink his health. Here's a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand at the moment, and I say Uncle Scrooge.
Well, Uncle Scrooge.
Merry
Uncle
Christmas.
Scrooge.
Good. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is. He wouldn't take it from me, but he may have it nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge. Uncle Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return and thanked them in an inaudible speech if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels.
Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside the sick, and they were cheerful by struggling men, and they were hopeful by poverty, and it was rich.
Are spirits' lives so short?
My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight.
Tonight?
Tonight at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near.
Forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask, but I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding from your skirts. Is it a foot or a claw?
It might be a claw, for the flesh there is upon it. Look here, man.
From the foldings of its robe it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable.
They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garment.
Oh, man. Look here, look. Look down here.
They were a boy and girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate, too, in their humility.
Spirit, are they yours?
They are man's, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom unless the writing be erased. Deny it. Slander those who tell it ye. Admit it for your factious purposes and make it worse and bide the end.
Oh, have they no refuge or resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Heed these words and know me better, man.
Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. As the vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, he beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him.
And now, a message from our sponsors.
Westview Hub, 435 Perry Highway in the Dollar General Plaza across from Isley's. Library, internet cafe, tutoring, community resource center, and food pantry. No applications, no income requirements, just a place to come and get some help. Visit westviewhub.org. Join a club or see a Shakespeare play. Westview Hub. Feeding the body, mind, and spirit. Westview Hub.
The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee. For in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded.
He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, spirit?
The spirit inclined its head. That was the only answer Scrooge received.
Ghost of the future? Oh, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I saw, I am prepared to bear you company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
Lead on. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me. I know. Lead on, spirit.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of townspeople. Observing that the hand was pointing to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
God knows.
What has he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know.
It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer.
I don't know I'm going if their lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I make one.
Well, I am the most disinterested one among us, after all, for I never wear black gloves, and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go, if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye.
The phantom glided on into a street. They went into an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half-naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly.
Far in this den of infamous resorts, there was a low-browed beetling shop. Upon the floor within were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, and refuse iron of all kinds.
Sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove, was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop.
But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too.
You couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlor. I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. We're all suitable to our calling. We're well matched. Come into the parlor. Come into the parlor.
Every person has a right to take care of themselves. This man always did. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these?
Not a dead man, I suppose.
If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw, why wasn't he a natural in his lifetime?
If he had been, he'd have someone to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there all alone by himself.
It's the truest word that has ever spoke. It's a judgment on him.
Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it.
It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all.
That's your account. I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it.
Open my bundle next, Joe.
What do you call this? Bed curtains?
Ah, bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not?
What? You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it.
Be careful with those blankets now.
His blankets?
Who else's do you think? He ain't likely to catch cold without 'em, I dare say.
I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh?
Oh, don't you be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. He can't look uglier than he did in that one. This is the end. You see? He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
I always give too much to the ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself. That's your account.
If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, spirit, I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and withdrawing it revealed a room by daylight, where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room.
At length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband. There was a remarkable expression on his face, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress. Is it good or bad?
Bad?
We are quite ruined?
No, there is hope yet, Carolyn.
If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened.
He is past relenting. He is dead.
She was a mild and patient creature, if her voice spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it. She prayed forgiveness the next moment and was sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know. But before that time, we shall be ready with the money. And even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Yes. Soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. And it was a happier Christmas indeed for this man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure.
Spirit, I see. But let me see some tenderness connected with a death.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated around the fire.
Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet.
The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face. The color hurts me eyes.
The color? Oh, poor Tiny Tim.
They're better now again. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time.
Past it rather, but I think he has walked a little slower than he used. These few last evenings, Mother.
I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed.
And so have I. Often.
But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. And there is your father at the door.
Hello, my dears. Why, this looks splendid. This will be completed long before Sunday.
Sunday? You went today, then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I'd walk there on a Sunday, my little child. My little child. I mustn't forget to tell you that I saw Mr. Scrooge's nephew in town today, and I noticed that he seemed just a little down, you know. I inquired what had happened, and since, you know, he's the pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard, he simply put his hand to my shoulder and said, I'm heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, and heartily sorry for your good wife. How he ever knew that, I don't know.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you're a good wife.
Everybody knows that.
Very well observed, my boy. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said, for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. Pray come to me. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us so much as for his kind way. This was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
I'm sure he's a good soul.
You would be sure of it, my dear, if you saw and spoke to him. But however and whenever we part from one another, I'm sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was amongst us.
No, never, Father.
I am very happy.
Spectre, Something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me, who was that man they were speaking of before?
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before, though at a different time, he thought. Indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future, into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. The spirit pointed. Scrooge followed the direction of its finger.
A graveyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name he had now to learn lay beneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place.
The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape.
Are these the shadows of the things that will be? Or are they shadows of the things that may be only? Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if persevered in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me.
Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
I am that man? No, Spirit! Oh, no, Spirit! Hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man. I must have been put with a cinder course. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shed off the lessons they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.
And now, a message from our sponsors.
Personalized consultations and applied research, the highest quality products to optimize your well-being. We support our community by sourcing local materials and distributing nationally. Ageless look, organic ingredients, advance your knowledge. Unique confections, boosting mind and body. Enhanced quality of life for pets of all ages. CBD Knowledge Centers, grand opening Saturday, August 1st.
Yes! And the bedpost was his own, the bed was his own, the room was his own, best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits, all three, shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees. Oh, Jacob, on my knees. They are not torn down. They are not torn down, rings and all. Oh, they are here. I am here. The shadows of things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. Merry Christmas to everyone! Happy New Year to all the world! Hello here! Woo-hoo! Hello! I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I am quite a baby. Well, never mind. I don't care. I would rather be a baby. Hello! Woo-hoo! Hello here!
He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding, dong. Bell, bell, dong, ding. Hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious.
Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold, cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious.
What's today?
cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him.
Eh?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? What? Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day? Oh, I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night? Oh, well, they can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello!
Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one, or at the corner?
I should hope I did.
Oh, what an intelligent boy. A remarkable boy.
Oh.
Do you know whether they sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
Oh, what a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging there now.
It is. Go and buy it.
Walker.
No. I'm in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here, that I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you a half-a-crown.
Ooh.
I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He shall know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present. And walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said,
Good morning, sir.
Merry Christmas to you.
And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had heard, those were the blithest in his ears. He had not gone far, when coming on towards him he beheld the good Samaritan who had walked into his counting-house the day before.
My dear madam, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, madam.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness...
Lord bless me! My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
Now, if you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?
Oh, my dear sir, I don't know what to say.
Oh, don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
I will.
Oh, thank ye. I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. God bless.
He walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up into the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon he turned his steps towards his nephew's house.
He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Fred!
Why, bless my soul, who's that?
It is I. Your Uncle Scrooge? I've come to dinner. Will you not let me in, Fred?
It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. They laughed, played games, ate some more, and laughed some more. But after some time, Scrooge noted the clock and jumped to his feet.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, my dear nephew, but I have some rather urgent business to tend to.
But, Uncle...
Oh, don't trouble yourself for one moment, Fred. Please set a place for me at your table as often as you wish. And Merry Christmas to you and yours, dear nephew.
Scrooge then found himself on a familiar street, standing in front of a familiar house that he had never actually visited before. Scrooge could hear within the joyous melodies of the holiday spirit behind the walls of the Cratchits' loving home. He approached the door and assumed an austere expression.
Mr. Cratchit!
The boisterous house immediately fell silent, as they instantly recognized the voice at the door. Bob made himself proper and meekly answered it.
Mr. Scrooge?
Hello! What do you mean by skipping work this day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I thought we had an understanding.
An understanding that this business does not thrive on generosity.
It's Christmas Day, sir. I thought...
But on the hard work of dedicated employees, and therefore...
It shall not be repeated.
I am about to raise your salary. Oh, a Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I had given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to attend your loving family with anything they need. We will discuss your affairs this very evening over a Christmas turkey. Make up the fires, Bob Cratchit.
Oh, Mr. Scrooge.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more.
And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father.
He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or as any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world.
Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him.
He had no further conference with spirits, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, every one.
Thank you for attending Steel City Shakespeare Center's presentation of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, presented in collaboration with the Westview Hub. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment to follow the link on your screen to make a donation. We make all of our programs free and available to the community, so please give as generously as you are able to ensure we can continue to engage and inspire in the year 2021 and beyond. To learn more about Steel City Shakespeare Center and upcoming programs and events, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or visit our website at steelcityshakespeare.org. In 2021, we will continue our partnership with the Westview Hub, offering educational programs and more performances like this, virtual if necessary, or in person if circumstances allow. Either way, we promise to be a light within the tunnel, illuminating the path and inspiring us onward through uncertain times. This is Steel City Shakespeare Center Artistic Director Jeffrey Chipps, wishing you a safe, healthy, and peaceful holiday season and a happy new year. Thank you.